Howard Bellamy didn't expect his usual Tuesday to begin with a parking violation and a pastel-colored envelope from the HOA. He found it tucked beneath his windshield wiper like a pink and cream butterfly waiting to sting. The seal bore the stylized M of the Marion Oaks Homeowners Association, embossed in glossy silver. The envelope felt light, insultingly light, for something that would shift the tone of his morning so sharply. He peeled it open with deliberate fingers, the cold air nipping at the tips. Inside was a single sheet of high-quality paper, signed at the bottom in loopy cursive, Belinda Moore, President. The fine was $75. The offense, failure to park front in, as per updated visual uniformity standards. Howard stood for a long moment, paper in hand, breath curling in front of him like steam off a kettle. Across the street, the HOA office's blinds were already drawn open, soft light illuminating a refurbished interior. He folded the letter in half, then again, and tucked it into his coat pocket. Some offices judge more than they serve, he muttered, before turning to his car, unlocking it with a tired click. At Lucas's cafe, the regulars were already filtering in. Howard claimed his usual seat by the front window, a small, square table with a wooden top darkened by years of coffee rings and conversations. Lucas greeted him with a raised chin and a mug of black coffee, placing it down without a word. The radio near the register was playing Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade, and the scent of cinnamon toast and bacon hovered warmly in the air. Howard ordered his usual, toast, eggs boiled soft, and a second mug of black. He left a $2 tip under the corner of his napkin before the first plate even arrived. It was the rhythm of the place. Steady. Comforting. Carl the mailman stopped by the counter for a quick refill. Cold one out, he said to no one in particular, then gave Howard a knowing look. You get one too? Howard just tapped the pocket where the envelope was folded. Like clockwork, he replied. Lucas wiped the counter with a clean cloth. Belinda's been on a roll lately. Last week, Doris got cited for having too many garden gnomes. I didn't know there was a limit. There is now, Carl chuckled, sipping his coffee. Howard didn't speak again until he finished his toast. Then he stood, nodded a silent thank you to Lucas, and walked out into the chill. The day was still settling into itself, and the sky held that particular southern gray, soft, but untrustworthy. Suite 5 sat on the corner of a modest strip mall that also housed a hair salon, a consignment shop, and an insurance office that never seemed to open. The HOA logo shimmered on the glass door, flanked by 2 newly planted shrubs in matching ceramic pots. Howard opened the door and stepped into a space that smelled of fresh paint and ambition. The floors were recently waxed, and a pale blue accent wall bore a gold-framed mission statement. Behind the counter, Belinda Moore stood like she'd been expecting him. Howard Bellamy, she said with a brightness too rehearsed to be sincere. She wore a cream blazer over a sky-blue blouse, a silver brooch shaped like a lighthouse pinned to her lapel. Good morning. Howard gave a small nod. Got your letter. Belinda smiled wider. Lovely stationery, isn't it? We upgraded this month. Just part of the HOA's ongoing rebranding efforts. Visual consistency builds pride, you know. I've been backing into that space for 7 years, Howard said evenly. We recently passed a motion. Front-in parking only. She tapped a stack of newsletters on the counter. Page 2. It keeps things uniform. Cleaner lines. Safer turns. Howard reached for one and began flipping through it. On the back, in italicized font, ran the quote of the month, "Order is the foundation of peace." Belinda Moore. We find to refine, she added, with a soft laugh. Howard didn't reply. He glanced around the office. A few picture frames hung slightly askew. The corner by the window held a tall potted plant, artificial and too glossy. The chair cushions didn't match. He looked back at Belinda. Could I get a printed copy of the updated parking rules? Of course, she said brightly, already reaching into a folder. Always good to have informed neighbors. Howard accepted the copy, folded it neatly, and turned toward the door. His eye caught something just past the potted plant, a small sign taped discreetly to the inside of the glass. It was half covered by the drape, but the letters were clear. Lease ends February 28. Outside, the breeze had picked up. Dry leaves swirled near the curb. Howard walked back to his car, climbed in, and sat for a moment with the engine off. The envelope lay in his lap. So they think backward parking needs forward thinking, he said quietly, before starting the car. At home, the silence welcomed him like a coat hung over old shoulders. He slipped out of his shoes, hung his keys on the hook, and moved toward the hallway cabinet. The drawer creaked slightly as he pulled it open. Inside were manila folders, labeled in thick black ink. He thumbed through them until he found the one he wanted. He pulled it out and carried it to the kitchen table, where the early light slanted across the wooden surface. The label read, HOA, 2015 to present. Never trust a rule you didn't vote for, Howard mutters as he sips his coffee and flips open an HOA charter. The wood-paneled walls of his living room held the scent of lemon oil and old books. Morning light stretched across the floor, warming the toes of his socks. The radio on the shelf crackled faintly, Glenn Miller again, or maybe Tommy Dorsey. Howard didn't check. His focus stayed on the document before him, pages creased but intact. The envelope from the day before lay open beside his coffee mug. He unfolded the citation again, then the addendum, HOA Ordinance Revision, Parking Compliance Update, December 28, 2022. He flipped to the back, scanning for signatures. 4. Just 4. He pushed his reading glasses up the bridge of his nose and rose. From the hallway cabinet came a manila folder labeled HOA Minutes, Past Quarters. He laid it open beside the newer letter and began to cross-reference. The bylaws from 2019 clearly stated that any changes to community-wide enforcement penalties must be approved by a 2/3 quorum of property-holding residents. The December meeting had not met that requirement, not by a long shot. There had been no notification sent, no opportunity to vote, and the meeting itself, by the notes, had been scheduled on December 28, during the holidays. He set the papers aside and reached for his phone. The call connected with a soft tone. Uncle H. Molly's voice burst through the screen. Her face appeared from a coffee shop backdrop, earbuds in, hair up in a messy bun. What's got you looking like a courtroom villain? Can I run something by you, counselor? He said. She grinned. Always. Howard laid out the facts, the fine, the regulation, the vote, or lack thereof. Molly scribbled something in a legal pad off-screen, nodding. Well, she said, tapping her pen against her chin, HOA boards can pass emergency provisions, but if this was a permanent fine structure, it absolutely needs community ratification. That's black-letter HOA law in South Carolina. Also, parking ordinances usually overlap with municipal code. Did they cite that? No municipal reference, Howard replied. Just visual standards. Molly raised an eyebrow. Wow. So, HOA now stands for harassing our autonomy, huh? He chuckled. Wouldn't be the first time. Send me scans of the fine and the addendum. I'll look at it tonight. Howard moved the phone slightly, showing her the kitchen table scattered with files. He tapped one corner. Found something else while digging. Oh? Lease record. Office Suite 5, HOA headquarters. Leased, not owned. Molly's eyebrows lifted. Seriously? Most HOAs either own or lease long-term. When's it up? End of February. She whistled. That's something. Also, Howard said, pausing, I'm thinking of filing a records request. See if I can get the full lease copy, plus renovation receipts. Good idea. Use the Freedom of Information policy. FOIA templates should apply since they're a governing body collecting community funds. Send me a sample request. Check your email in 5. Howard nodded. Thanks, Molly. She grinned. Of course. Oh, and I want cinnamon toast if this goes to court. You'll have to come down here for that. Tuesdays only. Tempting. They ended the call. Howard leaned back in his chair, fingers tented against his chin. The sun had moved across the living room, illuminating the edges of the stack of newsletters and charters like golden outlines. The air had that winter-dry feeling, crisp even indoors. By midday, Howard had dressed in a flannel shirt and cardigan, then made his way to Lucas's cafe. The place was its usual sleepy rhythm, forks tapping plates, low chatter, one man reading a folded newspaper near the window. A Tuesday Senior Special sign on the counter read, "Free cinnamon toast with any coffee, 60+ welcome." Lucas saw him and poured a mug before Howard. Even Saturday, same table? As ever, Howard replied, settling in. His fingers curled around the warm ceramic. He opened the email from Molly, copied the FOIA template into a blank document, and began replacing the placeholder text with HOA names and lease request details. Lucas came over with toast, cut in triangles, edges crisp. "You're writing legislation now?" Howard smiled slightly. "Just a humble inquiry. You always read the small print. That why you never bought extended warranties?" Extended warranties are optimism dressed up as contracts. Or traps wrapped in print too small to see. They shared a quiet chuckle. As the sun slanted through the cafe windows, Howard reviewed the lease summary again. It was a copy from the 2019 HOA mailing. Belinda had tucked it inside a fundraising pamphlet titled "Building a Brighter Tomorrow." The language clearly identified the office as leased through third-party property management, Suite 5, contract term, 4 years. No mention of renewal. Howard folded the summary gently and tucked it into a blue folder marked Suite 5, Lease Questions. He opened his email, attached the FOIA request, and hit send. As the day waned and he walked the 2 blocks home, the wind blew dried leaves along the sidewalks in loose, rustling swirls. The sky was turning to dusk by the time he reached his porch. Inside, the kitchen clock ticked softly. He placed the lease copy in the center of the dining table, weighted it with a coffee mug, then stood looking at it for a long moment. When the quiet grew complete again, Howard said aloud, "Let's see what happens in 30 days. Belinda didn't respond to the lease renewal. Howard did. The door to the leasing office jingled as Howard stepped inside, bringing with him the scent of light rain and the steady calm he wore like a second skin. The walls were lined with framed maps of strip malls and planned communities, each labeled with tidy dates and parcel numbers. A woman in her early 60s looked up from behind the counter, glasses perched halfway down her nose. "You must be Mr. Bellamy," she said, rising with a warm smile. "I must be," he replied. She extended a hand. "I'm Ms. Temple. I pulled the file after your call, Suite 5, yes?" Howard nodded. "That's the one." They sat across from each other at a walnut desk with a stack of file folders between them. Ms. Temple opened the top one and flipped through the lease documentation with practiced ease. "The HOA's lease expired at the end of February," she said, tapping a finger to a line on the page. "They were notified twice last fall." No response. Howard adjusted his cardigan and leaned slightly forward. "I'd like to submit an application. For professional use, small-scale tax prep, mostly for retirees. Just myself." Ms. Temple smiled. "That's refreshingly straightforward. I'll need a business registration and proof of liability coverage." "Already in the folder," Howard said, sliding a manila envelope across the desk. She opened it, skimming the pages. "You're thorough. I taught accounting for 30 years. Habits die hard." She chuckled. "This won't take long." That afternoon, back at home, Howard settled at his oak desk with a fresh cup of tea. The rain tapped softly on the window as he opened a video call. Molly's face filled the screen, blurred slightly at the edges by a cafe's low lighting. "So," she began, "you're really doing this?" Howard sipped his tea. "I'm doing this." Molly raised an eyebrow. "And you're sure Belinda didn't renew?" "I triple-checked," he said, rotating the camera toward the lease copy Ms. Temple had scanned for him. "Expired. No auto-renewal clause. The space is legally available. Molly grinned. You know what I said last time. A space you rent can become a space you lose, or gain. She lost it, Howard said. I just stepped in. And you're planning to announce it? He shook his head. No. Not yet. Molly leaned back, thinking. Low-key takeover. I like it. Just make sure everything stays public record. No sneaking. Howard nodded. Every form's filed. Lease begins March 1st. Guess that's tax season too. Ironic timing. 2 days later, Carl knocked on the screen door holding a folded HOA bulletin in his gloved hand. Howard took it with a quiet thank you and unfolded it at the kitchen table. The cover read, Vision 2023, Marion Oaks Moving Forward. On the back page was a short blurb in italic script. Repainting our office for a stronger tomorrow, under the leadership of your trusted HOA board. He read it twice, folded it in half, and placed it under his tea coaster. That weekend, Suite 5's windows remained dim. A few empty planters sat beneath the awning, and the lettering on the glass still read, Marion Oaks HOA. Howard stood on the sidewalk across the street, unnoticed, hands in his coat pockets. He returned Monday morning with a single sheet of clean white paper and a roll of tape. The message was short, centered, and printed in crisp black font. Future home of Howard Bellamy, tax prep and consultation. He taped it to the inside of the glass, smoothed the corners, then stepped back. The rain had passed, and the sidewalk shone with residual dampness. Across the street, Lucas opened the cafe door and leaned on the frame with a towel in one hand. You redecorating? He asked. Howard crossed toward him at an easy pace. Just being neighborly, he replied. Lucas smirked. Belinda's gonna have a fit. Howard looked across the parking lot, eyes resting on the building. She's busy, he said. Carl told me she's picking out marble pattern wallpaper. HOA funds, too. Lucas let out a low whistle. Good timing, then. Howard turned back to the glass, watching the simple sign sway slightly as the door caught the breeze. Let's see if they read my fine print. The room smelled like burnt coffee and nervous silence. Belinda stood at the lectern, smiling like nothing was broken. Rows of folding chairs filled the multipurpose room at Marion Oaks Community Center. Some creaked under the weight of restless attendees, others sat empty but for coats and pamphlets. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed softly, tinting the air a flat white. Against the back wall, a long folding table held styrofoam cups, a jug of weak coffee, and a plate of store-bought cookies arranged without conviction. Howard sat 3 rows from the back, his cane propped between his knees, a yellow notepad balanced on his lap. He hadn't spoken a word since the meeting started, but his pen moved steadily as Belinda rattled off bullet points from a color-coded slideshow. The title, 2023 and Beyond, Building a Brighter HOA. Behind her, the projector screen flickered as she advanced slides showing before and after photos of the Suite 5 office, new wall colors, potted plants, what appeared to be a faux marble desk surface. And thanks to prudent financial stewardship, she said with practiced brightness, we've transformed a tired space into a beacon of order and professionalism. Howard glanced around the packed room and remembered Molly's words, you won't need to shout if your papers are louder. Doris sat to his left, arms crossed, lips pursed. Carl was near the coffee, sipping and watching. Mrs. Hatcher, ever polite, clutched a notepad with nothing written on it. Mr. Langley, wide-eyed, kept his attention firmly on his lap. Belinda clicked to the next slide. Now, the 2022 financial summary. As you'll see, all expenditures are well within budget parameters. She gestured toward a pie chart. These include office improvements, community signage, and upgraded correspondence materials. Howard waited until she reached the final slide and asked, without raising his voice, Madam Chair, may I inquire about the lease status for Suite 5? Belinda blinked. Pardon? The lease. For the HOA office. Is it active? She gave a short laugh. Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be? Howard lifted a piece of paper from his folder. Because this is a copy of the 2019 lease, which expired on February 28 of this year. There is no renewal clause, and no record of extension. The room quieted. Belinda's smile wavered. I'm sure the board has handled. Howard interrupted, gently but firmly. And yet, renovations were paid for using HOA funds. Here, he unfolded a second paper, is an itemized receipt, $600 for wallpaper, $300 for seating and miscellaneous decor. These expenses do not appear in any meeting minutes I've reviewed. There were murmurs now. A cough from the second row. Carl leaned forward slightly. Molly's voice echoed from Howard's phone, which rested face up on his thigh in speaker mode. According to HOA statutes in South Carolina, she said, calm and clipped, any expenditure over $250 not related to emergency repair must be put to a resident vote. Cosmetic upgrades do not qualify. Belinda's voice lost some of its syrup. We followed internal authorization protocols. Howard turned slightly. Would any board member present care to confirm? Heads lowered. No hands raised. Doris leaned forward and said plainly, you mean to tell us you spent our dues redecorating a space we don't legally occupy? Belinda opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's not. Howard stood, holding up a final sheet of paper. This is an email from the Property Management Office. It confirms that as of March 1st, the lease on Suite 5 will be held in my name, for use as a private tax preparation office. The projector hummed. The pie chart behind Belinda continued to glow in silence. From the back, someone whispered, is she serious? Howard did not raise his voice. We funded a renovation on a space that will no longer belong to us. Belinda's face flushed. She adjusted the hem of her blazer. This is clearly a misunderstanding. I'm sure. From the center of the room came Doris's voice, flat and incredulous. So we're funding an office she doesn't even own? Belinda tried the door handle twice before noticing the discreet silver sign that simply read, Suite 5, temporarily closed. The morning sun cast a warm light across the brick-lined walkway of the strip mall, highlighting the faint scuff marks on the sidewalk from years of foot traffic. Wind stirred gently through the hedges, rattling the plastic, now leasing, placard posted 2 units down. Belinda stood in her usual heels, perfectly polished, facing a door that no longer welcomed her. She blinked at the sign. It was tastefully done, silver brushed metal, clean typeface, no smudges or tape lines. There was no name, no HOA seal. Just a clear message. She tugged the handle again. Locked. Across the parking lot, inside Lucas's cafe, Howard sipped his coffee without looking up. He sat at his usual table by the window, facing the glass with the calm of a man who knew the storm would come but had already checked the roof. Your decaf, Lucas said, placing a fresh cup beside him. On the lid, scrawled in thick blue marker, backed in. Stayed steady. Howard smiled faintly and tilted the cup in thanks. Outside, Belinda paced twice in front of the office, then pulled out her phone. She held it tight to her ear, her lips drawn into a thin line. From Howard's vantage point, it wasn't hard to guess who she was calling. 5 minutes later, a dark sedan pulled into the lot. Miss Temple stepped out, her gray coat buttoned neatly, a folder in hand. Belinda met her halfway across the walkway. Howard couldn't hear the exchange, but he didn't need to. Miss Temple opened the folder, showed a few pages, then gestured toward the building. Belinda's posture stiffened. She said something sharp, stepped back, then turned and looked directly across the parking lot. Her eyes locked on Howard. He met her gaze calmly, then lifted his cup and took a long sip. Lucas dried his hands on a dish towel. You know, he said, some folks might call this petty. It's not revenge, Howard replied. It's reset. Lucas chuckled. Heard that somewhere. Across the street, Belinda stormed off without another word to Miss Temple. She vanished around the corner of the building. Howard rose from his chair. He left a $5 bill tucked under the mug, then stepped into the daylight with unhurried grace. From the inside pocket of his coat, he withdrew a new sign, neatly laminated. He crossed the street, opened Suite 5 with a brass key, stepped in, and emerged moments later to affix the placard on the interior of the glass. Howard Bellamy, Tax Prep and Community Help. Carl wandered by just in time to catch him smoothing the tape. So, is it open for complaints too? Howard didn't glance over. Only the ones with receipts. Carl laughed, then lowered his voice. You might want to laminate that lease agreement too. Howard tipped his head. Already done. As the sun climbed higher, the air warmed enough to feel like early spring. Belinda returned 15 minutes later, no longer on the phone. Her expression was unreadable, more calculation than fury now. She strode straight into Lucas's cafe, heels sharp on tile. Howard was already seated again, the remains of his cinnamon toast pushed to one side. She didn't wait to be invited. You planned this. Howard looked up slowly. You planned not to renew, he said softly. I just filled the silence. Her nostrils flared. You blindsided the entire board. He shrugged. I followed the posted deadline. She glanced out the window at the new sign, her jaw tight. This is an embarrassment. Howard picked up his napkin and folded it slowly. Only if you read the details. She spun on her heel and exited without another word. Lucas emerged from the kitchen with a slip of paper. Just came through the mail run. He handed it to Howard, a brightly colored HOA flyer. Across the top, in bold letters. Special emergency meeting, March 4th. Attendance strongly encouraged. The chairs were all full, the cookies were gone, and the air smelled like retribution. There wasn't a single empty seat in the community center that evening. The long table of refreshments had been picked clean within the first 10 minutes, not from appetite, but from nerves. No one wanted to be caught chewing when things started to unravel. The overhead lights buzzed louder than usual, casting a harsh white over the laminated agenda sheets laid out on every chair. Belinda stood at the front of the room, blazer pressed, smile tight. The folder in her hands was thicker than necessary, filled more with defense than with substance. She scanned the crowd with forced composure, landing on Howard only once before flicking her gaze elsewhere. Howard sat near the middle, flanked by Doris on one side and Mr. Langley on the other. His cane rested against his thigh, his folder lay closed, his expression unreadable. From the phone on his lap, Molly's voice chimed in faintly via Zoom, her face muted but attentive. Doris leaned in and whispered, "Last time I saw this many people here, we were voting on lawn gnome colors." Howard didn't smile, but his fingers tapped once on the armrest. Belinda cleared her throat. "Good evening, everyone. I appreciate you making time for this emergency session. We've had some confusion, and I'd like to clarify the board's intentions moving forward." There were no murmurs of agreement. Just the distant creak of someone adjusting in a folding chair. As many of you know, Belinda continued, Suite 5 has recently transitioned to private use. While unfortunate, the board is initiating an internal restructuring to ensure operations remain smooth. A few heads tilted. Howard rose slowly, adjusting the crease in his cardigan. "Ms. Moore," he began, voice calm, "when exactly was the last board vote to approve the recent office renovations?" Belinda hesitated. "The expenses were within my discretionary budget." Howard opened his folder. "That budget, according to our bylaws, caps at $250. The wallpaper alone cost $600. Gasps, then silence. Molly's voice cut through from the phone. "There are 3 separate violations, as I see it. 1. Unvoted cosmetic renovations exceeding limit. 2. Unauthorized use of HOA funds post-lease expiration. 3. Failure to notify residents of financial decisions impacting dues." Belinda gripped her folder tighter. "We've always operated in good faith." Mrs. Hatcher stood, a folded sheet in her hands. Her voice, though soft, carried. "I received this letter from the HOA last December. It told me my Christmas lights were at nuisance glare and threatened daily fines if I didn't remove them. She unfolded the page slowly. No vote. No warning. Just her signature at the bottom. Belinda flushed. That was about safety. I've been hanging those lights since '93, Mrs. Hatcher said evenly. My husband wired them before he passed. No one ever complained. The silence in the room shifted. It deepened. Mr. Langley, usually quiet, stood next. His voice trembled only slightly. I'd like to call for a vote of no confidence in the current HOA president. It hung there, suspended. Belinda froze. Doris stood. Seconded. Then came the hands, slow at first, then steady. One by one, raised without fanfare. The tally grew: Carl, Mrs. Hatcher, Langley, Doris, half a dozen others. More followed. Belinda didn't speak. She looked around for an ally and found none. Her hands lowered. Her mouth opened, then closed. The folder at her side dipped, as if losing weight. Molly's voice returned, quieter now. Well. That settles that. Howard stayed seated. There was no need to stand anymore. Someone shifted nearby, and a paper fluttered to the floor near his chair. Howard bent to pick it up. It was a brightly colored flyer, slightly wrinkled, with bold lettering. HOA Bake-Off, cancelled until further notice. He looked at it for a beat, then folded it once, cleanly. Maybe it's time we uncancel a few things. With Belinda gone, the chairs at the front of the room looked strangely available. The next HOA meeting came quietly. No flyers in all caps. No bolded reminders on the bulletin board. Just a few paper notices posted by the mailboxes and a mention from Carl on his route. No unexpected drama. Still, over 24 neighbors showed up, fewer than last time, but enough to fill the center with a kind of cautious energy. The folding chairs had been rearranged into a wide half-circle. No one sat in the official seats at the front, where the board had usually perched behind a plastic table with placards and water bottles. Those chairs remained empty, like a stage set waiting for a rewritten script. Howard sat in the second row, cardigan neatly buttoned, a notebook in his lap. He listened as neighbors shared concerns about spring lawn standards and whether the community garage sale might return. The mood was tentative but lighter. When Mr. Langley cleared his throat and announced that the board had unanimously voted to invite Howard to serve as interim HOA president, a few people clapped, genuine, if uncertain. Howard stood slowly. I appreciate the vote of confidence, he said. But I won't be stepping into Belinda's seat. Instead, I've drafted a proposal. He raised a single page. A community advisory council. 3 rotating volunteers every quarter. Open to all homeowners. We'll publish notes, invite ideas. No gatekeeping, no surprise fees. There was a pause, then murmurs of agreement. Doris called out, as long as nobody brings back that rule about curtain colors, I'm in. Laughter rippled through the room. Later that afternoon, Howard sat on his porch, the first true warmth of March soaking into the wooden boards beneath his feet. The grass at the edge of the walk had started to green again, pushing through brown remnants of winter. Molly's voice buzzed through the phone speaker balanced on the armrest. You really turned it down? She asked. I've had enough podiums for one lifetime, he replied, sipping mint tea from the mug Doris had delivered earlier. Figured I could be more useful where no one's pointing a microphone. I like the council idea, Molly said. Flexible. Practical. And it'll make sure people feel heard. That's the idea. Inside Suite 5, the transformation was subtle. A bookshelf now stood against the back wall, filled with IRS booklets, neighborhood maps, and a small row of mugs for visitors. A corkboard had been pinned up near the desk. Instead of HOA notices, it featured handwritten suggestions, thank you notes, and one photograph of Mrs. Hatcher's Christmas lights, reinstalled with new solar timers. That evening, Lucas brought by a fresh sign. He didn't say much, just nodded and handed it over. Howard stepped outside with a small toolkit and, in a few minutes, the glass door bore new lettering. Howard Bellamy, Tax Prep and Community Help. Beneath it, in smaller script, Lucas's edition, neatly etched in vinyl. Ask once, listen twice. Howard stared at it for a long moment, then smiled. The next morning, Carl dropped by the cafe with a folded flyer and slid it across the counter to Lucas. New event, he said. Howard might want the first copy. Lucas read it aloud, grinning. Spring Bake-Off, March 12th. No rules. Just good neighbors. Howard backed gently into the same parking spot. No fine. No glare. Just a quiet click of gears and a sigh of belonging. The lot near the community green had been half full when he arrived, folding chairs and picnic tables already dotting the grass like islands in a calm sea. Flags flapped gently on thin wire posts, and someone had hung crepe paper from the gazebo in colors that didn't quite match, but no one seemed to mind. It was March 12th, and the air smelled like cinnamon, sugar, and warm bread. A line of baked goods stretched across the length of two joined tables, banana loaves, lattice pies, cookies shaped like flowers. Some bore little handwritten notes: Doris's buttermilk cake, gluten-free, Hatcher's apple crisp, made with love, and rum. Howard stepped out of his car and closed the door with a soft thunk. The cherry pie he carried was still warm, wrapped in a towel with red and white checks, his late wife's favorite kitchen cloth. He set it gently among the others, straightened the edge of the dish, and exhaled. Back in your spot, I see, said Molly, approaching with a folded newspaper in hand. Her coat flared slightly in the breeze, and her grin was bright against the early sun. No citations today, Howard said. So far. She handed him the paper. The front page bore a headline in modest font: HOA elections postponed, community reset continues. Thought you'd want a copy for the archives, she said. Howard tucked it under his arm. Maybe I'll frame it. Across the green, children dashed between tables, laughing with the wild momentum of spring. Carl stood by the lemonade stand, offering cups with crooked ice cubes. Lucas was manning the grill, flipping cinnamon toast on a portable flat-top griddle while Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade floated faintly from a small radio nearby. Doris arrived with a tray of lemon squares and a thermos of peppermint tea. She handed Howard a cup without asking. Sun's on our side today, she said. He nodded. Feels earned. Mrs. Hatcher wandered over with a story about the old bake-offs, how one year someone had brought a 4-layer coconut cake with sparklers on top and nearly set the raffle tickets on fire. Mr. Langley followed, balancing a tin of oatmeal cookies and a careful smile. Molly leaned close. Uncle H, you built more than a tax office. Howard didn't reply at first. He watched as a neighbor, someone he didn't know well, eased their car into the spot next to his. They backed in slowly, checked the mirrors, and parked straight. Howard caught the driver's eye and nodded. The nod was returned. Later, when Lucas clanged a spatula against a metal tray and asked for quiet, the crowd hushed. He gestured toward Howard. Wouldn't be right, he said, to start this without hearing from the guy who made it possible. Howard stepped forward, hands in the pockets of his slacks. He took a breath and looked out over the community, faces warm, expectant, open. Sometimes, he said, it takes backing in to find your place. And sometimes, you just need room to stand. The applause wasn't loud, but it was full, palms meeting not with force, but with understanding. As people returned to their slices and stories, a woman from the local paper lowered her camera, the soft click of the shutter lost in the breeze. Near the center table, someone had staked a small wooden sign into the ground. Dedicated to those who hold the line with quiet hands. Later, as the event wound down and the tables emptied, a circle of children played ring toss near the gazebo. One of them paused by a wooden chair set just beneath a tree. It bore a carved plaque. Mr. Bellamy, for listening. The last rays of afternoon filtered through the branches, and from the grill, the radio played on, Glenn Miller's horn section swelling into the soft shimmer of Moonlight Serenade. On a quiet Sunday morning, Howard backed into his favorite spot, no longer a symbol of defiance, but of quiet victory. What began with a fine became a gentle reckoning, a community reclaiming its voice, one document, one kind word, one meeting at a time. When rules serve the people, they build harmony. When used to control, they unravel trust. Perhaps all it takes is one steady neighbor to hold the line, so others remember they can, too. Like a porch light left on at dusk, that quiet stand can help guide a whole street home.